Hello, this is Below the Bottom Tier, and today we will be doing a beginner's guide to Lost Relics. Lost Relics is an engine, blockchain based game that is similar to the Diablo games in terms of play. If you want to know how to register and sign up for the game, there are other videos out there that can explain things a lot better. If you are here thinking this game is a quick way to earn money, then this is not the game for you. This is the type of crypto game where you need to invest lots of time and earn anything. The mindset you need to have in coming into this would be I want to play this game because it is fun, not because it will earn you money. You will burn out really quickly if you just want to earn money through this game. But enough of that, since our main focus would be on what to do when you get into the game itself. We will be discussing things such as settings, general knowledge of the game, and tips on how to survive your first dungeon. Timestamps in the description. For the settings, we will first talk about the most important, the controls. The controls, especially the rotation, is the most important thing here in the game. Now, what you would want to set this as A and D for your camera rotations right and left. And how that works is I'll show you. If I move my camera to the left and move my camera to the right, it helps you see the angles better. Next up is the chat settings. You would want to turn this off or you're gonna hear a bunch of ping noises, which is not something you would really want to hear when you're inside the dungeon. So I suggest you turn this off. Moving on to the next one, the settings for the audio. The audio settings, I prefer to keep my music to 0 and the sound effects to 5%. The reason for this is I can watch videos while I play the game. Next, the game settings. The game settings, well, here you'll be able to set your language. So that's what determines your server usually. You can change it anytime you want. And some people prefer to show exit confirmation, but for me, I just like faster runs, so I turn it off. Now, this setting is the most important, and this is the setting that you'll be switching the most often, which is the camera style. This is classic isometric, as you can see here. It's a top-down version of what you can see, and this classic isometric, you'd usually be swapping it to a low angle. So this is the low angle version of this camera angle or camera setting. Now, why is this important? You ask. For these angles, the low angle is usually used in big open areas. And when you have a longbow class weapon, which I'll be showing pictures in your screen now. The classic isometric is more useful in cavern-like dungeons, which I'll be showing images of later. As for the video, it is more on your preference since it is your full screen, your resolution, and the quality that you want. And that's about it for the settings. Moving on from the settings, we will be talking about the general knowledge of the game. It is very important that you do not die in the dungeon, because when you die, you will lose your virtual items. Note the items you lose when you die are virtual items, and the items you keep when you die are blockchain items. The only exception for virtual items are pets and outfits. If you die with them, they go back to your stash. Let's talk about breakable items. When you hover over an item, it will show whether it is breakable or not. If an item has a breakable tag on it, It means over time it will just randomly break, and a prompt on the top right corner will tell you that your item broke. These only apply to virtual weapons and tools. If the tag does not appear, then it will not break over time. Do not confuse this with the destructible and indestructible tags. The destructible tag just means when you die, you lose your items. And the indestructible tag means when you die, your items go back to your stash on the second floor of the tavern. Clicking tab shows you the mini map of the town. From there, you can explore and see places like the Royal Emporium and General Store. Though, the tutorial will give you a rundown of the town so you don't need to worry too much about it. But I will be discussing this more in depth in another video. But up in your screen would be the places that you can actually visit within the town. Keep in mind your main goal here is to get to the bounty guy. He is at the end of the beginner's questline. He will also be discussed in another video. As for the tips on how to survive your first dungeon, I'm not 100% sure, but when you start, I'm pretty sure you get gold. I think it was about 75 gold. With that gold, hey, sorry to interrupt the video, but some information about the game has changed. You don't start off with gold anymore. So, what you can do with this process is you can just do this process after you do the first dungeon. But as you'll see later on, you actually don't need healing in the first dungeon because it's very basic and very easy to get to. So, with that, on with the video. You will need to buy pots and at the general store, which in the video is the general store. From here, you'll talk to this lady, go to resources, and buy pots. Usually, you'll buy a whole bunch of it. About 21 pots should be fine, or about 5-10 pots. So, after purchasing your pots, what you would be doing is heading to the well. Here is the well that you can gather water from. After gathering the water, you'll be heading to the mill, which is near the alchemy table in the minimap. So the process takes a while, but it will be worth it for beginners because once you collect enough flour, I'll only be collecting about 5 of this. You'll be going to the cooking station, which is quite far from here, and you'll be baking bread. Bread gives you healing, and it's a good way to keep you alive when you're starting off the game. But note that when you create bread, there's a chance for you to burn the bread. So just keep in mind, I think it's like a 20% chance to burn like this. You burnt your item. Now, if you hover over the bread, it will show that there is a plus 50 over 5 seconds, meaning to say that's 10 health per second. Keep that in mind. So when you bring this to the dungeon, which I will show you a run later, uh, this will keep you alive if you get too injured. And as for the pots, what you can do with that is you can just go back to the tavern and place it in your stash. and you can use it again. Or you can load it up with more water and get more flour and make more bread. So you go all the way up to your stash, and you can just right click this to deposit all of the same type of item. Keep this in mind when you enter the dungeon. There are only 4 ways of leaving. 1. Finding the exit. This is the most traditional way and the only way for you to keep your rewards from the dungeon. 2. Abandoning the dungeon. This can only be done if you have not left the purple circle, which you can see here. And as you can see, this is a cavern-based dungeon, so classic isometric would be the best. And keep this in mind. See, I have 4 of these breads, right? And then they are considered virtual items. But if I click abandon, when I come out of the dungeon, I still have the 4 breads and my weapon. So abandoning the dungeon allows you to keep the items that you have brought into the dungeon. But you have to keep this in mind. You cannot attack a mob. Like if you open the door and attack a mob, it will void your abandon. So you can no longer abandon the dungeon even though you are still in the purple circle. 3. Using a teleportation scroll. But using this method, you do not keep any of the items that you picked up and the experience you gained, but you will keep whatever items you brought in except for the items that you used. Example, I brought in 5 pieces of bread and used 2. Then I used the teleportation scroll. Those 2 pieces of bread are counted as used and will not be brought back. The teleportation scrolls are a one-time use and you need to get another one. So another thing to keep in mind with these teleportation scrolls is that it will give you a prompt. You will immediately be teleported to the destination. Are you sure you want to do this? When this prompt pops up, you need to click yes. But take note that if you die while you haven't clicked yes teleport now, you are considered dead and you will lose your virtual items. So when you use this in a dungeon, keep that in mind because it would be a pity to lose your items right before you were about to teleport out. And the last way for you to get out of the dungeon is death. Something you really do not want to happen because not only do you not keep your experience, you also lose all the virtual items you brought in with you. The next step I will give you is right click whenever possible. Left clicking is a basic attack while right clicking is a power attack. And I'll show you that with the training dummy here in the second room. So this is the training dummy. As you can see, 35, but a power attack, there's 343s that show up, but it consumes your mana. This blue bar here. As you can see, but don't be fooled because this mana will only regenerate until 250 for a level 1. But in town, it will regenerate all the way to max. Let's move on to the things you need to avoid for your first dungeon. Traps only appear in cavern type dungeons, so keep that in mind. You're mostly safe in forest areas and island type areas. Stepping on one takes around 250 HP from you, so stepping on too many will kill you. This is what kills most new players. Note if you do end up dying, you can use your fists and punch the mobs until you have enough money to buy new weapons again in the Royal Emporium. So it is not a game over when you die early. Now, with all of that said, I will be showing you a dungeon run with a loadout that you would most probably be using, which is your bow, the rusty sword. So these are the items that you get from the very start, and the bread that you've prepared. You can ignore the scroll, but I'll show you what happens. I can But I'll show you that you can actually run the dungeon without using the bread. And the fists are just like the rusty sword, so you don't really need to worry too much about it. It just does slightly less damage. That's why I'm telling you to be very careful. And this run would be sped up, so it doesn't take too much of your time. So this would be the first dungeon that most no that all beginners would start with, Lost Catacombs. So here's the run. As you can see, as mentioned in one of the tips, right click whenever possible because it brings the health all the way down. Sometimes you have left click though when they're really low. Like this one. And then you just left click and just kill it. Another big tip is always try to avoid these grates, is because sometimes it spews fire. But in the lower dungeons it doesn't. Same with this especially, these grates. Sometimes they speed fire in higher rank dungeons, so you have to wait for them to cross over. But that tip would be more useful in a later video. So in these dungeons you can see there are chests. And then you'll need the keys, which are these, which are dropped by the monsters. So once you open it, you usually just get gold and a bit of XP. Those vases are breakables. You should break them, they give you a bit of extra gold. More gold and a bit of XP. do not step on the lava because if you do, you take a lot of burn damage. See, it does a huge ton of damage to you. Now, as for traps, you don't need to worry too much on the first dungeon because there's not a lot. There's no traps here aside from that lava pit that you just saw. And this is the only way you can get out of the dungeon and still claim your rewards. As you can see, I didn't even use any of my bread, so you don't need your bread to clear this dungeon. So here is the stats that you'll receive when you finish the dungeon. Well, that's it for the video. Thank you all for watching, and hopefully you learned something in this video. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe. I'll be doing more Lost Relics content in the future. This is only part one of two of the guides. In my next video, I'd be talking about how you should progress, what you should buy, and what the levels would do for you as you progress through the game. So watch out for those. And if there are things that you want me to improve on or things that you find I did wrong, leave some comments or suggestions that you would want me to tackle about Lost Relics. So with that said, again, thank you for watching and I'll see you next time.